How's it going, everybody? RyeSquad here today. If you're struggling with your NHL 25 rebuilds, or you just recently picked up the game because you thought the franchise trailer looked cool, look no further than this episode, guys. We are going to dive into how to rebuild your franchise for beginners. This is going to be a very baseline, basic level, rudimentary tips, giving you ideas on what our contracts are good and bad, how to assign your scouts, how to do your coaches, what players are good, and ultimately how to get over the hump to win the Stanley Cup. It will not be a video covering every single piece of a franchise mode. Data782, another NHL YouTuber, does great videos on that, so check him out if you want every little detail and there's something I didn't cover. If you do have a question, throw it in the comment section. So let's go ahead and get started, guys. We are going to be rebuilding the Buffalo Sabres. I'm just going to show you guys what I would do, how to assess the roster, and to understand when you should rebuild a team and what teams are in that rebuild mode. There's two kind of rebuilds that I like to look for. It's either the tear it down, the downswing of a rebuild, or the teams that are already have torn it down and you're building up. That's the upswing of the rebuild. The Sabres are a team more on the upswing of the rebuild. Yes, if you're a hockey fan, we've been saying that for 13 years, but I think they're a really good starter team this year. They have plenty of talent. They've got a very healthy cap situation, and there's plenty of young players that can develop into contributors for this roster right away. If you're looking for ideas of teams to start with, that's where we'll go. I picked the Sabres. They're my favorite team. Another good team you could choose is the Chicago Blackhawks. They're a team that is on the up and up as far as ascending rebuilds. They've got their franchise centerman here in Connor Bedard. You can see potential of medium franchise. That is a cornerstone player. That is the best of the best. A franchise potential does not come around very often. And he is only 19 years old and already is an 88 overall, what I would classify as a solid first liner. So if you guys wanted to skip over tanking for talent, trying to be bad so you get a good draft pick so you can find a franchise player in the draft, Chicago is another great team that you could choose. Conversely, a team that is more on the downswing than the upswing when it comes to their lifespan as a roster, the Calgary Flames is a good one for those of you that want to stay out west. Rasmus Andersson is 27. He's not growing anymore, hence the exact elite, and he's an 88 defenseman. They don't have star forwards, right? Nazem Kadri's their best rated forward according to trade value and just straight up overall, and he's 33. You've got 30-year-old Mackenzie Weegar. This is when players start to decline. Generally, they hit their peak around 26, 27 years old. That's when they do stop growing. That is when they are going to be the best they are. So if those of you that are a bit more seasoned or want a bit more of a challenge, Calgary would probably be a good team to take over. They're a team that you could trade away assets, be bad, and then rebuild your roster with young, fresh, new talent. And they even have Pairings here, a medium elite 71 overall, so not ready anytime soon, but he's only 18. Room to grow there. And then a couple more teams on the upswing. I've already mentioned Buffalo. I've mentioned Chicago. Anaheim, I think, is another good team that is on the upswing. You can see they have 4 medium elites already at the top. I'm in the proposed trade screen. So for those of you that want to know how to get back to this screen, you just go into proposed trade right here in the main menu. I'll show you here real quick. It is on the bar chart tab. So you just go down here, proposed trade. And then you can see every team's roster, even players that are not signed to contracts, but just have the rights to. So you drafted them, but you haven't given them a contract yet. You have time. You don't have to sign those guys. I will show you in just a minute. But Anaheim here, go into add item, and you can see it's already sorted by trade value. So these are the most valuable players to the team, and they're all really young. Trevor Zegras is the oldest of these medium elites. He's 23 years old, still has room to grow. 81 Gauthier at 20. You've got 84 Mintyukov at 20. And then Leo Carlson, probably the most promising player here, 19 years old and 83 overall, a guy that you could probably, well, you'd probably have to stick on your top line, surround him with some decent scoring talent. Hope he puts up points because points are a big way to grow the team. Finally, the last team I'll touch on as a potential rebuild candidate for you would be the Columbus Blue Jackets. The tragic passing of Johnny Gaudreau, to him and his brother, our prayers go out to their family. And I hope they're doing okay. Former Columbus Blue Jacket player. But the team is chock full of young talent. You can see there are some veterans, 27-year-old Zach Werenski. You've got 30-year-old Damon Severson, Sean Monahan, but then you've got this other young core of Fantilli, Jirasek, Johnson, and Lindstrom. You can see that they're all 21 or younger, 3 of them in the mid-80s, and they're medium elite. This is a team that is primed to take a jump in year number 2, so maybe sell off some players in year number 1, a Damon Severson of 30, and then you could get some picks back, some prospects, or just get a younger bit of talent for this team. I think it's another good, fun team to take a look at and potentially use as your rebuild team. And I'll give you the same look of the Buffalo Sabres. We're going to get very well acquainted with these guys as we go through this episode, but here they are. You've got high elite Rasmus Dahlin, a number 1 blue liner, a defender, is very hard to find. And when you get a guy like Rasmus Dahlin, you lock him down, you keep him, and you use him on the power play, you use him on the penalty kill, you give him all the minutes, and a guy like this really does help your team. But you can see the Sabres have a ton of medium elite talent and then medium top 6 forwards. I will go into that when I show you guys the lines, but that's really high. You have 12 forwards, so if you're talking the top 6, those are good players. It's a first liner or a second liner. Elite players are just that. They're elite. They can be some of the best in the game. And then obviously franchise guys are the kind of guys that you just build a dynasty around. Think about Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Wayne Gretzky, the number 1 elite type players. Obviously, these guys are elite. Those are the guys that you can build a team around. You don't need a franchise player to become a dominant force, but having a bunch of elite players like the Sabres do is great. And we'll just keep touching on that. You've got the talent. You've got elites. You pick one of these teams that are on the upswing. How do I know who to keep around, and how do I know who to get rid of? You've got to think to yourself, you've got to build a core. You've got to get a group of players that are around the same age, that are around the same kind of trajectory, and that can grow and develop together. The Sabres have done that. They've got Rasmus Dahlin at 24, Tage Thompson at 26, Owen Power at 21, Bowen Byram, at 87, and even Alex Tuck. Then you've got Dylan Cousins, JJ Peterka, Jack Quinn in their early 20s, but also in the low to mid 80s. The guy you might be looking at here is Alex Tuck. He's the one 28 years old, a little bit older than everybody. Is he somebody that I want to keep around? I would personally say yes. You take a look at the ages, and you want to look at these guys' peaks as a range, not necessarily a single year. So you can assume that these guys will be at their peak overall around 24 years old, and they'll stay there probably until they're 28. You've got this 4-year window, which I think is plenty of time for you to make moves and construct a really good roster. But 24 to 28, when your players are all at their peak in that range, that's when you're golden. That is your perfect cup window. Now, can you still compete with a 32-year-old on the top 6? Sure, but you'll be worried about his potential decline. He's not going to grow. He's not getting better. His career is going to be over by the time he's in his mid-30s, if not maybe a couple years sooner, which is why you see everybody going after the 24 to 26 range, so that when they've got this group of 24 to 26 every couple years, you've got this 24 to 28 core. You're ready to go right now. And then you take a look at a guy like Zach Benson. If Zach Benson was your only player that you were looking at, he's about 5 years away from his prime. Now, is he still going to be an amazing player? Potentially. Yes, by the time he's 21, he could absolutely be in the upper 80s. But my point is, you want to find a group of guys that you're going to be able to have under cost control, which we will touch on as well, and that they're going to grow and develop and produce at the same point in time. You don't want to have a bunch of 35-year-olds and a bunch of 19-year-olds, because you've got declining guys, and then you've also got a bunch of guys who are potentially good. Zach Benson's very good, but he's not quite ready to step into the same kind of role as the 87 Alex Tuck, and I don't think he would be next year, assuming that Alex Tuck was maybe 31. So that's how you identify your core. That's how you identify when a player is potentially too old or maybe too young to really put the whole eggs in his basket. You got to find these guys that are in their mid-20s, maybe pushing 28. That's probably the oldest guy I'd acquire for a current core. I think 24 to 26 is your sweet spot. I know I haven't touched on the goaltending position yet, but we will get there specifically in this view. Let's talk about your lines. Overalls, contracts, those are some of the most confusing things that you can find. Obviously, overalls are on a scale of 1 to 99. You'll never find anybody that low, nor will you use them. But we want to get as many guys as close to 99 as possible. And taking a look at what I'd consider to be solid first liners, I think 87 is the minimum I would say I would be comfortable with rocking into a season as a first line player. Anytime you get 88, 89, that's solid first liner. You get 90 plus, then you're golden. Then you've got a really, really strong team. There are two ways you could do it. You could have the 87, 88, 87 kind of first line, which will be cheaper because players will ask more based on how high their overall is. That's how they'll find their sense of self-worth. And if you have that 87, 88, 87, you're more than likely going to be able to have an 87, 87, maybe multiple 87s or an 88 on your second line. You can do that with two really strong lines or load up, get the 91s, much like a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs does, and just stack that first line, have one good quality player on your second line, and then surround them with a bunch of guys like Jack Quinn, the 83s. The 83s, 84 is probably more of a bona fide second liner, I'd say, but you get 82s and 83s. Those are your middle sixers. And then your third line center, you probably want him to be good at defense. Ryan McLeod, pretty good at defense. You want faceoffs, you want stick checking, and you want defensive awareness. Two-way forwards, those are your guys here in this role. Your second line, I would like to see, maybe some 89s, 88, 90 on the top line. Then you could have an 87 with an 85 and an 84 on your second line, within maybe 83s, 81, 82 is your third line range. And then your fourth line, you don't necessarily need to go crazy about these guys. I think anybody with a strong defensive category, you see that Beck Malenstein here as a grinder. He's not going to produce much for you offensively, but that's not what you need your fourth line for. You need them for their physical category. Having them with speed is nice because that's always more fun, especially if you play the game. But defense is your big ticket item here on the fourth line. You want high defensive awareness, high stick checking, and, decent shot blocking would be good as well. These are the guys that your computer will put on the penalty kill, which we'll touch on in a minute. But these guys can be anywhere from a 78 to an 81, like you see here, 82, and you're just kind of rolling in it. So just to recap, there's multiple ways you can do this, but what I would look for is 88 plus for the first line, ideally 89 or above. 88 you can get by with, means they're a little bit cheaper. The second line, you're probably looking at 85s to 87s. Your third line, you're looking at 82s to 84s. And then on your fourth line, you're looking at 80 or below. Now moving over to the defensive side of things, and there are only 3 pairs of defensemen in the NHL. What I've said is you want that number one defenseman. If you can find that guy that is an 89 or higher, that is your stud defenseman. You are golden. You are happy. Taking a look at the Sabres, they're notorious for having quite a talented blue line when it comes to the top end of it. So you can see Bowen Byram here is a great number 2 defenseman at 87. He complements Rasmus Dahlin because they get the chemistry, which we'll touch on with coaching as well. But Byram complements Dahlin, the 91 Dahlin, the 87 Bowen Byram. So if you can get that stud defenseman or groom somebody to be that stud defenseman and pair him with a quality partner, an 87 I'd say is as low as I would go, 86 if you're just early on in the rebuild. Taking a look at your middle pairing, these are the guys you want, 84, 85, 86. You can get away with an 83, but that's the range I'm looking for here in the middle. And then 82 to probably 80. You can find a lot of 80 overall defensemen for relatively cheap. So 80 to 82, I wouldn't say you want to go with anybody less than an 80, unless they're a 79, 78 overall medium elite rookie that, you've already got a juggernaut and you just want to play this rookie that you got because he's looking really good. So obviously the top pairing, find your number one defenseman, find him a partner. Both of these guys should be 87 plus, ideally 89 for the one or higher. Then on your middle pairing, you've got 84 to 86. I think you're looking very, very good with 84s to 86s in the middle pairing. And then finally 80 to 82 as your third pairing. Now it's up to goaltenders, which they operate a bit differently. They develop a little bit later. They develop closer to that 25, 26 range. Then You know, you saw Zach Benson be an 82 at 19, or Jack Quinn, Dylan Cousins, JJ Peterka being 83, 84, 85 in their early 20s. That's not very common when it comes to goaltenders. And when you find one, it's best to keep them around for a while. They're not the most important position to me anyway. Some people value a strong goaltender very highly. But goaltenders can be very expensive for a guy that plays only 50 to 60 games a season, simply because they can't play every night. It's a very taxing position. But goaltenders, you're going to be fine with an 85 or higher. That is where I'm going to say you're able to win the cup with an 85 as your starting goaltender. Now, anything higher, 87s, 88s, heck, if you can find somebody 89, 90, that's when you've got an elite shutdown caliber goaltender. That is a guy that you're just going to have to decide on, do I want to pay him $10 million or not? Because he's going to ask for that. And $10 million certainly is a lot of an $80+ million cap, almost $90 million. You're talking about 1/9 of the cap on one player. And we'll talk about the cap here in just a minute. But I think your backup goalie, similar to your defenseman, you can find 81s, 82s. These guys are going to play 20 to 30 games a season. And you're not going to lose a season because of them, but they certainly help. No need to get 87, 85 here. I think an 85 and 82 is actually a pretty solid tandem. I think if you can get a goaltender that can grow like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, or if you take a look at the scratch goaltender Devin Levi, medium elite, 22, 82, not very common. Find a guy like this, you're chilling just fine with the goaltending position. When he becomes an 85, Luukkonen's probably capped out in 86 or an 87. Then you can really decide on who you want to keep. Move Luukkonen for picks because you got younger Devin Levi, and you're looking pretty good. Or if you're not the Buffalo Sabres and you're just trying to find a goaltender of quality, an 85, 86 would probably do you justice. So 85 to 87 is a quality starting goaltender. 88 and up, you're looking at an elite goaltender. And then 83 down to 80, you're looking at a fine backup. I'd say 82 to 83. 82 should be fine to find a guy like that for pretty cheap. Not going to cost you a ton. 83, you're starting to look at guys that think of themselves as fringe starters. And 81 and 80, you can definitely improve on those. So now you're setting up all your lines. Now let's talk about the special teams, the power play. A very common thing for power plays is to have one defenseman and 4 forwards on the line. Taking a look at the Buffalo Sabres, they do that here as well with Peterka, Benson, Zucker, Lafferty as your 4 forwards on power play 2, and Owen Power as the defenseman. Usually you look at the defenseman up top as the kind of puck mover. You get your shooters on the wings so they can rip far side or take one-timers. You get a guy with decent quick hands, a quick shot, playmaking ability here in the middle, and then you've got a big body in front. Now, Tage Thompson has 1T. He's got puck on a string. He's got elite edges. He's the kind of guy I would love as my 1T guy over here, because you want his right hand facing the inside of the ice. If a guy is left-handed, they actually don't have any lefties besides Rasmus Dahlin, but if you wanted one-timing options, you could put Dahlin here on the right side because his left side is facing the net. I would put personally Dahlin here at the point. Obviously, as a defenseman, being the last guy back, even on the power play, is important. But he's the kind of guy that's going to be able to cycle, and they're likely going to have your best slap shot. So if you've got no options anywhere else and you just want to shoot it and hope that Tuck and Cousins' big body gets the screen, Tuck has those good hands, can maybe get a deflection on it. There you go. That is how you'd set up your power play. And do the same thing down here with your power play too, but obviously it's going to be dipping into less quality players. The Sabres here, Tuck, Thompson, Cousins, Quinn, 4 of the best players that they have on the top 6. You're going to use 4 of your top 6 here generally. And then Benson and Peterka will likely play on power play number 2. And sure enough, there they are. And then you're starting to dip into those higher quality third liners like you got, like Jason Zucker in 83, 82, Sam Lafferty. And then you go with your number 2 defenseman there. That's why I like to get that 87 to partner with my number 1, because power play 2 is still going to play about 30 to 40 seconds of every 2-minute power play. Now we're looking at the penalty kill, and now you're shorthanded. You have 4 guys rather than 5. You still want to lean on your number 1 defenseman, but you'll also want to be looking out for those defensemen that have good defensive categories. You can see Connor Clifton here, not a guy that has great offensive awareness, but if you take a look at his shot blocking, stick checking, and defensive awareness, That's pretty darn solid. And oh, not to mention he's a very physical player. Speed is also important, especially if you're going to play. If you're not going to play the games, speed is less important here. You want to look for guys that are grinders, that are two-way forwards, that have this quality defensive category. You look at the faceoffs, 80 and 75 is pretty good. You'll want to make Lafferty your center at 80 faceoffs. I know it's weird to think of 80 as very good, but anything above 70 is good. 75 is great. 80 plus is elite. So you'll find those guys here and there. But you want to win the faceoff because the first thing you want to do is get rid of the puck, get it down the ice. You can see Lafferty and McLeod, maybe not superstars, but McLeod can absolutely fly as well as having good stick checking. And then you've got Lafferty, who's a very well-balanced defensive category and can win faceoffs very, very well. An elite faceoff rating with 80 overall. Not the fastest, but he's going to win you faceoffs, and he's more physical than McLeod, so you'll be safe there. So you may be asking me, great, I have all these players, but for some reason they aren't clicking, they aren't gelling, and I'm seeing a minus over to the right on my defensive pairings. I'm not seeing the +2s like you are. There's no green on my forward core. Well, that then turns to your head coach. And head coach overall does in fact matter. Now, if you play with owner mode off, you don't have to worry about salary. So my suggestion, if you're just starting, turn off owner mode and play, just throw money everywhere. You've got unlimited budget when it comes to that. And the reason I mention that is because higher overall coaches are going to ask for more budget. And dealing with the budget in owner mode is just a headache, especially if you're just starting. But obviously, I'd like to see my coach be an A-. It has to start with an A for me. B+ if I believe that he can grow, because yes, coaches do grow. But you do want to get a guy of an A- or an A or an A+ if you certainly can. The biggest thing though that coaches can do, besides being good, is provide chemistry. And you can see that Jaden Owen, the coach that I was just generated with, has a 64% scheme fit with my team. And you can see based on the roster, it doesn't quite dive into it too deeply here, but you can see that some of the best fits are with Quinn, with Benson, Byram and Power, as well as Dahlin are pretty good fits. Thompson and Tuck aren't necessarily the greatest fits. And you see that just by filling up that bar over to the right side of the screen. But you want to know why they don't fit? Well, here you go. You can see a coach's strategies. Now you can see the line strategies are overload, behind the net, and crash the net, with the carry dump bias being carry dump or balanced. The cycle shoot bias is cycle shoot or balanced. Energy efficient is efficient energy or balanced. And then finally, don't block or block, believe it or not, is block, balanced, and don't block. And you'll see that each player has their own strategy that they prefer. Same thing with the defense. It's a lot simpler here, though. Hold the line, balanced or pinch. Cycle, balanced, or shoot. Those are the two categories you got to look for. So you can see Jaden Owen likes overload, carry, cycle, efficient, balanced. A very common and a very popular first line strategy. Sometimes it'll be behind the net. Sometimes it'll be overload. Either way, carry, cycle, efficient, balanced, or carry, shoot, efficient, balanced are generally what offensive head coaches are going to want. I do recommend finding a more offensive head coach. If the guy says defense here or physical, generally going to be tougher to build a good roster. It's been done before. So those of you that are watching this that say, I've done this before, it's definitely doable, but pumping goals into the opponent's net certainly is more fun, and it is a little bit easier to find. But we mentioned that Tage Thompson doesn't exactly like our head coach's scheme. He's not against it, but he's not for it. And you're wondering, well, is this going to happen every time? No. Most of the time, players have randomly generated preferences, and you'll have a randomly generated coach every time. So maybe you could play the luck of the draw until you find the right one. Sometimes I like to play with the cards that are dealt. Certain player types as well. I've not mentioned that yet, but a power forward in Tage Thompson is more likely going to be a physical bias, somebody that's going to shoot, not necessarily a skilled player, even though he is going to be a very skilled player, and power forwards can be some of the best players in the game. But you've got a guy like Alex Tuck, who's also listed as a power forward, which, no surprise, our offensive-minded head coach isn't gelling with two of our best players, which happen to be power forwards, which aren't necessarily offensive in the game's generation. Dylan Cousins, same thing here. He's listed as a two-way forward. You can see how he's balanced, cycle, blocking the puck. Whereas a guy like Tage Thompson is balanced, likes to shoot. Tuck, balanced, likes to cycle. So like I mentioned, it is a little bit random at times, but generally you can see the balanced, the balance shoot, balance versus balance cycle, balanced. You've got a pretty good structure between Tuck and Thompson to get a good first line chemistry gelling. Now, potentially, maybe a guy like Jack Quinn could complement them well because he doesn't exactly fit the first line. Zach Benson does fit the first line. Actually, Peterka fits the first line perfectly. So if we move him up there, I guess it's just the lack of total abilities that fit. And you can play around with this too. It'll update in real time. You can see if we put Quinn up there, it definitely doesn't work. But Jason Zucker, does it work here? Not really. So you can see that you got to play around with a little bit. And when you don't have players that fit perfectly, it does make chemistry more challenging. Chemistry is not an end-all be-all. It is a booster, which is why it is +1 overall. It is not, +10, +20, right? You're not getting anything crazy, but you can get up to a +5. So while I'm not trying to dismiss it entirely, I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world. When it first came out, it was kind of broken. Now, I think it's in a pretty balanced state that even this +3, you'll see really good performances from this line because you can see there is a lot of green. You want a lot of green. That's what you're going to look for. But the +3, they'll be great. It'll be a 90, an 85, and an 86. But something to consider, right? If you're trying to get to those thresholds that I mentioned earlier, chemistry is a good way to do it. I wouldn't do it like this because then you're just sacrificing talent on your top line to chase the big green number. And you're wondering, hey, wait a second. I don't see overload. I don't see behind the net. I don't see crash. Yeah, that's a big L. EA, I don't know why you don't do that, but tell me what they prefer. What is their preferred line strategy? Because clearly Tuck doesn't like overload because we remember that from when we just looked at it. But then you put Tuck down here, that offensive strategy line over to the right is now a green check mark. So Alex Tuck is a fan of behind the net, not a fan of overload. Dylan Cousins is a fan of overload, not a fan of behind the net. And you can see that's most likely why Tuck is helping out so much, not to mention the fact that Benson and Quinn both are fans of behind the net. Peterka, also a fan of behind the net, but not exactly doing it with the rest of them, the carry dump, the cycle shoot, etc., etc. I'm not chasing numbers here by moving my second line, my first liners down to my second line. I feel like getting a +1 is just fine because now we have an 89 Thompson, an 88 Tuck, and an 85 Peterka. I feel like that's quite good, honestly, considering the ranges we mentioned earlier. Now that we have Dylan Cousins up there, it's 86, and our second line gets the +2. So we have an 85, an 84, and 86. It's exactly where we wanted to be, and these guys are young, they'll grow, and ice time helps a player grow, and so do putting up points. All of this to say, there are generally coaches out there in the offseason. They work just like free agents. You'll be lucky to find one right at the very start, so sometimes it's better to just deal with it as is. Otherwise, deal with it in the offseason, treat them like free agents. You can go ahead and just fire your coach by pressing the X button on Xbox or square on PS5. And then you'll get rid of your coach. You will need to fill in the coach somewhere. So if you do fire your coach, just push Y or triangle to then promote the coach you want. And you can see that this guy's style is physical. Probably not the kind of guy I want to be my head coach. If I'm going for an offensive style, you could promote this guy. He's also physical. Wow, we got an unlucky draw here. So the coaches are certainly something I'd be looking at if I was doing this myself. So by now, I've broken down what kind of roster you want it to look like, how to get that roster performing well, but how do we get the roster itself? And the main way to do it is to draft well. You want to tear down an existing roster that's old and not good enough, and instead make it a young, up-and-coming roster. Some of the teams I mentioned, Buffalo, Columbus, Chicago, even Anaheim, are teams on the up. Calgary, a team more on the down, so this would be where you would trade away those players for picks or younger players. Right now, with a team like the Sabres, you should be probably letting it ride and seeing what happens, or you can make a splash. But how do we get to be a team like the Sabres? Maybe you chose a different team, your favorite team, because you randomly bought a mystery hockey jersey, and now your favorite team is Ottawa or Detroit, a team that I didn't touch on. So how do we get that team to get better? Well, the number one thing is scouting. And taking a look at your scouts, if you play with Fog of War on, you definitely want to keep 8 pro scouts. You can see the type of scout here in this column. You can see I've got 8 pro scouts, 1 for each of the 4 NHL divisions, which is the major league, and then you've got 1 for each of the 4 AHL division, which is the minor league. And this will help you determine if a player fits a scheme or not. So if we take a quick look, I'll just briefly pop in back to proposed trade. You're looking for a player to potentially come in and be your third line center. And I want to go after Leo Carlsson. Hopefully we have him scouted. If not, you can hit the Y button on or triangle on the player card. Tell them to quickly scout him or completely scout him. It'll take a little bit longer, but since we already have a scout in the NHL's Pacific Division, we don't have to worry about that at all. And you can see here, Leo Carlsson would be the perfect fit for our first forward line. You can see he's got 4 on the binoculars there, and that just means it's the most accurate it can be. It's exact. It is almost exact. It's not necessarily saying he's going to fit perfectly, but he's going to be a better fit than not on your first line here. So if we wanted to acquire Leo Carlsson and slap him on the first line, we absolutely could do that. And it would probably be a boost to our offensive chemistry there. And we'd have a young player that could grow and add to this stable of just really good young players. But now that we've done pro scouting, the more important part is the amateur scouting. So you're going to be scouting all across the world. And you can see here we've got a scout in Russia, Liga, and SHL, which are both Nordic countries, both Nordic leagues. Ice here is within mainland Europe. You've got USA East, USA Central, and then you've got the QMJHL, OHL, and WHL, which are all Canadian junior leagues. And you can see we have 17 out of 20 scouts filled. So you can fill that up, especially with owner mode off. You have no reason not to have a full scouting stable. One thing I will mention, there are 3 regions within the United States. So let's go ahead, hire ourselves a USA scout. So you can see this scout is in USA. I'll just filter it to it real quick, pushing the right trigger. And Brassard, Ald, Cook, Rippey, and Tavares, all of these guys and girls are great scouts for the USA. Now, if you have a specific region in mind, you can go ahead and click the right stick, take a look down in the bottom left-hand corner there for USA. Maybe I need a USA East scout. So because the A+ region familiarity means they're going to do slightly better, I wouldn't pass up an A for an A+. Just like, look, James Cook. Let James cook. It's so perfect. Go Bills. After he didn't play last night, but it's okay. James Cook here. A+, A+, A+. Perfect USA scout. So you can find that kind of player or scout there. Offer them a contract unless you're in free agency and competing with other teams, which you can see there next to years wanted underneath their name. They would say teams interested and show the teams. Unless you are competing with other teams, you can just leave the salary as the same. It doesn't hurt to bump it all the way up if you're not playing with owner mode. If you are playing with owner mode, I don't think I would bump this up because then you have to deal with the budget, and that's just gross. So anyway, we're going to hire a scout, but he comes in and, oh, shoot, he's assigned to USA East, right? We aren't there yet, but if he's assigned to USA East, you can push Y and go ahead and send him to North America. Take a look at USA, and then, you know what? I don't have a USA West scout, right? 0 scouts in the region. We've got 1 in the Central and 1 in the East already, so let's go ahead and move our East scout to the West. You do that by North America, USA, going over to USA West, confirming that assignment, and there. Now you can see he's blue, because this guy has been moved to a different region. And once you have it all sorted, I think you should probably have... 3 USA scouts, which would mean you would have to hire 1 more because this is generally the preset. Hire 1 more USA scout. Hire 1 or 2 more for the CHL, potentially in the OHL or WHL. The QMJHL doesn't have a lot of talent immediately in drafts, so OHL and WHL are your best bets. If you would like to just hire 1 additional CHL scout, I would recommend then your 3rd additional scout being in Russia or one of the 2 Nordic leagues in Liga or SHL. But now you've got your scouts all set up. You've got a bunch of good scouts, and you want to go ahead and start making them find players. And you want to know, how do I know how to find the good players? It's pretty easy. You go into scout, you push A, You go right, you scout specific players, you clear whatever nonsense they got in here. You just can push down and X or square until you see it's all clear over there on the right. Then you just come in here, you potential and comparison, and keep doing that. And I like to set my scouts for every 2-ish months, right? So we're starting at the beginning of October, so let's scout players until the end of November. December 4th. Okay, sure. It's the start of December. Yeah, it's close enough. So we would go ahead, set all those guys to potential and comparison, which all you have to do is do it once, and then you can just push A, and you can see it auto-populates potential and comparison. That'll get you a guy's potential, which is the most telling thing about if a player is going to be good or not, right? We're talking about 17, 18-year-olds. We're talking about, are they going to be good? I would like to know their potential. Yes, you could look at the character assessment. Yes, you could look at the playing style. That stuff kind of uncovers itself naturally as you ask him to do potential and comparison, and you're prioritizing the most important part of the draft, which is a player's potential. So just do potential and comparison. And then when you're all set here, you're set for December 4th. You push the start button, and you're good to go. And he's set to December 4th, and you just keep doing that, right? You can take a look here at where players are projected to go. Pairings there, the number 1 player in the draft is that CS ranking there, and you can see they just kind of randomly scout. I do highly recommend manually scouting amateurs because it's going to make your world a lot better when we get to the draft. But you can see here, I'll just go over potential and comparison, boom. And then this is a good scout, so you can see you can scout a lot more players in one trip, and there's November 29th. One thing I will note is not to scout the same players every time, because, well, scout them until you know them, is what I should say. Scout players until you know them, because if you already know a player's potential with the 4 bars of accuracy, you're not going to get it any more accurate. That's maximum accuracy. So once you've got the 4 bars, I no longer have to scout Pairings. Now I can go down to Miettinen, right, in the next 2-month segment, right? So keep an eye on that. You can just click the right stick here and take a look. It'll populate here once we do get a scouting report in there. But that is how you assign your scouts, and that is how you find the players to draft and really get good players in your system and get a lot of trade value. And speaking of trade value, that's another great way to acquire young talent. You can see that each player has a trade value bar. They each have a potential, which is what we're scouting. And I mentioned that players with high elite can get into the low 90s. Players with franchise can get into the mid to upper 90s. Players with elite can get into the high 80s, low 90s, depending on how good they are. Medium top sixers can become second liners. That's kind of how I look at it. I look at franchise players as the dude, elite players as first liners, top sixers as second liners and third liners, and then I don't really worry about growing and developing fourth liners because those guys aren't too expensive on the free agent market. But you can see the Sabres have a ton of medium top sixes. Defense are a little bit different, so we'll go touch on them. Defensemen also have franchise and elite, but instead of being a top 6, you've got a top 4, right? We talk about the top 2 lines being the most crucial. Top 6 forwards, top 4 defensemen. I'm not too excited about a top 6 defenseman. If you're getting offered top 6, that means, hey, they have a chance to be an NHLer. It's not really moving the needle, right? I'm not looking for third pairing defensemen to be developed and acquired for my pipeline. I'm looking for the guys that can really move the needle, the guys that are going to be in the top 4, that play most of the minutes, or guys that are going to be absolute game breakers and game changers like Dahlin, Power, and Byram have the ability to be. They are still so young. They have so much potential. A Sabres rebuild would practically be done for you if you can just put it together. But say you want to move on from Tuck because you're like, I'm not convinced the Sabres are ready to make a push. He's 28. I'd like to make the core a little bit younger. What you can do is then move on from a guy like Alex Tuck. I am in the find trade the tab here. A proposed trade is when you have a trade in mind or you just want to poke around. Find trade is like, hey, CPU teams, what would you do if I offered you Alex Tuck? And the reason Alex Tuck doesn't have a lot of offers is because he's got a modified no trades clause. Don't worry, guys. We are getting to the contract thing very, very soon. But Alex Tuck, we're looking at 2 second-round picks. That's a decent amount of value. Picks are never guaranteed, though, obviously. You don't know exactly what you're going to get. You don't know exactly what the draft class is going to look like. Are they valuable? Sure. But Alex Tuch is going to be able to put up points on your team this year. A second-round pick is going to probably be a couple years away. Taking a look at the Seattle Kraken offer, they're willing to offer Adam Larsson a third and a fourth. So let's go ahead, click on Edit Trade, because I don't know everything about Adam Larsson in the NHL 25. Sorry, but I just don't have every single attribute of his memorized. So let's go ahead and take a look. He's an 84, which I'd say is a solid middle pairing defenseman. He's listed as a defensive defenseman, so his role is not to score points. It's more to play defensive. Offensive defenseman, score points, two-way, kind of do a little bit of everything. But defensive defenseman, not points guys, playing defense, blocking shots. As you can see, that defensive category is very, very good. The 88, 90, 88 in the three categories we care about. Defensemen don't take faceoffs, so you don't have to worry about that. But he's an elite defender. Very, very good there. Now, do I want to give up one of my first liners in 87 in Tuch? No. So they're trying to sweeten the deal. Tuch, I think, is a high-end second liner, low-end first liner. Larsson, bona fide middle pairing defenseman. So I'd rather have the number one guy who's going to put up a lot of points. So they're trying to add some picks. Personally, I don't think this value matches to me because I don't think we need defensemen. We need more forwards. So I would go ahead and decline this trade, but that is how you would find a trade and kind of assess the trade. Use those brackets we're talking about. And potentially, the fine trade could be used to go after somebody else. We mentioned Leo Carlsson is a great first-line fit. Bowen Byram and JJ Peterka, and they'll send you some offers. So you can see here would be our first next year, Peterka and Zucker, or Benson and Rosen. I don't know if I'd do that one. But say, hey, I want Carlson to replace Tuch, and then I'm going to go get Adam Larsson for the Tuch deal, and then boom, you're done. So you could potentially do this deal if you really wanted to. Bowen Byram is your number 2 defenseman. He's 23. Leo Carlsson is 19. They're at different stages of their growth, right? 4 years. If you think in 4 years that potentially Leo Carlsson could develop, right? If you think his ceiling in 4 more years is an 87, then I think absolutely. I think Leo Carlsson's potential could get him into the 91. So I think this is not that terrible of a deal, but I don't think it makes sense for where the team is currently, right? Byram, being only 23, being an 87, is still got room to grow. Leo Carlsson has plenty of room to grow, but so does JJ Peterka. Jason Peterka, his nickname is JJ Peterka. 84, 22, medium top 6. He's a guy that could become a high-quality second liner like Alex Tuch, potentially up to an 87, likely going to be an 85, maybe an 86. Maybe if you get lucky with a lot of growth, maybe he can be a top liner in the 90s, but I don't think this trade makes sense. Obviously, this is why we talk about the draft. Getting guys like Leo Carlsson to come in and be a stud is going to be really, really hard. So now you've gone ahead, you've sent off some of your older players. Alex Tuch, gone for 2 seconds, and you drafted a medium top 6 and a low elite in his place. And now they're developing. Now they're great. Now we have to decide, do we want to pay everybody? Because we can't. How much do we want to pay everybody, though, is the question. And players will ask for different amounts based on their potential, based on their age, and based on their overall. You can see the Sabres currently have Dahlin locked up to $11 million, which is really, really high amongst all defensemen, but as a 91 overall, he's probably worth it. Tage Thompson, as an 88 at $7 million, is a really good deal. You'll probably be paying $8.5 million for an 88 overall now. And then obviously Bowen Byram's a steal. Alex Tuch is a steal at 4.75. That's why you hope that you to sign these guys long term before they develop into something great. For example, JJ Peterka is currently on his entry-level deal, something you'll see when you draft a lot of players. If we go to the unsigned, you can see these players are players I've drafted that I haven't signed. Now, obviously, we haven't gone a year, but they're players that we just haven't signed yet. You could potentially leave them unsigned. The only players, well, you get that ELC eligibility, right? So you saw that JJ Peterka. We'll dive into that. I'll tell you guys about that. Why not? I was just deliberating whether or not I wanted to yet, but let's do it. JJ Peterka's making under $1 million. He's an 84 overall. That's fantastic. Sometimes you've got 87 overall franchise guys making $900,000, $0.9 million. And that's because they're on what's called an ELC, or an entry-level contract. That entry-level contract is mandated by the NHL. So you can offer a certain range, but no more than X amount, right? You can see that it's set by the league. 0.975 is the most I can offer. It will increase as the cap increases in future years, and so will these numbers that I'm throwing at you, right? What do I think a top liner should make, right? A top liner probably makes 8+ million, probably closer to 9 if you're signing them later on in their development. But if you can get a guy like Tage, when he's an 86 medium elite, to sign for $7.5 million for 7 years, and then all of a sudden, you know, when he turns 25, he jumps to a 90. You got an absolute steal of a contract. So that's kind of what we're thinking about here. It's a risk and reward system based on years and length. But we're not talking about. We're talking about the ELC. So these guys, you can't change the years. You can't change the salary offered because they haven't even gotten a contract yet. Once they get their first contract, then you can really do all that. But you can see this little pen blank icon essentially tells me how many years of unsigned eligibility they have left. For example, we have Miedema and Panoka, who this season, they are using their last year of unsigned eligibility. If we do not sign them in the offseason before we get to the free agency period, so you'll get to that re-sign phase in the offseason, they will become UFAs, unrestricted free agents. These unrestricted free agents are allowed to go wherever they want because they can. Obviously, Brunette here, we have an extra year, so if we don't sign him by the end of the year, he's still going to be our player. He won't be able to play on the roster, but he'll at least be assigned to the Sabres organization for an extra year, right? And then after next year, if we don't sign him, he will become an unrestricted free agent. As these guys do not count to the contracts at the bottom, so we're at 50 out of 50. I think if I tried to sign Panoka right now, we would not be able to sign him. You can only have 50 guys with numbers in here. And guys that had a contract last year do count to this year's contract. So like when we get to the offseason, you'll see that we'll still be at 50 out of 50. But some of these guys may, like Bowen Byram, right? If I don't sign him now before the season starts, at the end of the season, he'll still count towards the contracts we have on the roster. But, you know, if I could click on him and click on release, and then he no longer counts, he's no longer around, he goes and becomes an immediate free agent. But let's talk about JJ Peterka, right? He's 84 overall, 22 years old. He's still got 4 years of development potentially left. And I think he can get into the 87. I think he can be Alex Tuck. So let's go ahead and talk to him. And this is where the new feature of enter negotiation can come into play. But let's just start with this screen. There you go. That is what his asking price is. He wants a 4-year deal at $4.3 million. Now, I want him for longer than that. I think I want JJ Peterka around for 7 years. 8 years is the max you can sign one of your players. 7 is the max you can sign a free agent. But I want him around for 7 years because I want him until he's at the end of that peak age window, right? If he's 22 now, he'll be 29 when this contract expires. I don't want to give him what he wants because in 4 years, he'll be 26, and that'll be the best JJ Peterka will ever be. I am then going to be giving him a potentially 3-year deal, and he will stay as good as he is and potentially decline. Oh, by the way, when JJ Peterka's at his peak, he's not going to be asking for 4.3. He's probably going to be asking for closer to 7 million at that point. So if I want to pay my second liner 7 million, or do I want to pay him about 4 to 5 million? You'll save yourself on the cap that way. It is a little bit of a risk, because he could not develop. He could stay at this 84. Or if you're signing a guy who's an 82 at 22 and you think maybe he could grow to be an 87 and you're really banking on that, that's when I would get worried. However, the player's asking price does kind of correlate to what their overall is going to be. But I like JJ Peterka. He's my favorite player in real life, so I want him to stick around. Now, all of a sudden, you can see his asking price, it went up from 4.3, which is over here, to the 5.1 over to the right. You can see his interest in the contract goes down with every time I offer him another year. So we're going to have to do something to sweeten the deal a little bit. So I think getting up to matching his asking price is one thing we could do, or we can enter the negotiation screen, right? But 7 years at $5 million, I think $5 to $6 million for a quality second liner is a beautiful contract. I think up to 7, if you're really like, I need to lock this guy down. I think he's got high-end first line potential. He's already a second liner. I think that's fine. We'll go with Byram next because he's going to be that elite youngster that we'll talk about. But this is the kind of guy that you're going to see a lot of. 22 years old, low to mid 80s, has room to grow a little bit. I think $5 million for a second liner is perfectly fine. That's where I like to keep everybody, is $4 to $6 million. The third line, I like to keep them around $2.5 to $3.5 million. And then the bottom line, I like to be sub 2, which leaves your top line to get the $8+ million contracts, maybe even 10+ if they are a franchise player. Blue liners, we'll talk about in a minute, but JJ Peterka here, 5.1 for 7 years. I don't mind this deal at all, but you know what? JJ Peterka is my favorite player. I'm never going to trade him. I'm going to give him a no movement clause. Sure, you could do that because you see he now loves the contract, but that means you can't move the player without him consenting to it. So you're like, oh man, JJ, you're 29, but I have like 4 franchise players and you're going to be a 4th line player. I want to trade you for a 1st round pick. He could easily say no. And you're like, wait, I need the cap space though. I need like an extra $2.5 million to be able to sign this new goaltender. He can just say no. So that's what a no movement clause does. A full no trade clause does the same thing, means you can't trade him. You could potentially, with a no trade clause, send him down to the minors. You do save a little bit on the cap there, but it's not going to be enough to really move the needle. So no trade clause and no movement clause are essentially the same thing in our mind. So then you've got the potential of a no movement clause, and you can do it reduced, and you can see that this could change. You can change the amount of teams by changing the trade protection. And it's just in the last year when you go to reduced, it seems that they do change the no movement clause to a modified no trade clause. If we just go to full no trade clause, we can see that, and then we will just change it here. Obviously, we're not able to change it too much, but you can see we'll just drop it down to 83%. It gets 16 teams. It just moves the amount of teams. And then you can't go to 100% because that's just full. So there you go. That is a no trade clause. Then if you wanted to go to a modified no trade clause, you could do reduced or full. If you do a reduced one, you're able to offer less teams. Full, you can say it's not a full no trade clause, but there's only 20 teams you can say no to. And all of what I'm saying right now is this little nuances of these trade negotiations or these contract negotiations. So if I offer JJ Peterka a full 62% trade protection, as you can tell at the bottom of the screen, hopefully I'm not covering it up, 20 teams, no trade. So he's allowed to say no to 20 teams. Yet he has to say yes to the other 12 teams. So that's a way to get him to like the offer, find a deal that works out for both parties. You can see he's only a bar and a half away from loving the contract when I do that. If I go to full, there's just no clause, he's now about 2.5 bars. So that is one way to say, you could potentially do that. He is ineligible for trade protection over the first 4 years because I believe he is a restricted free agent over those years. I think that's my guess. The expiry status is definitely important. He's a UFA at the end of the 4th year. At the end of the 3rd year, he's a restricted free agent. And you might have noticed I talked about UFA. It means they can go out in free agency if you don't sign them and sign with anybody. A restricted free agent, you can qualify them for a portion of the final salary the previous year. So I believe this 3.85 will factor into Bowen Byram's RFA status here. And you'll be able to notice that when you click here, in the offseason only, not during the regular season when you can offer extensions, but only in the offseason, you'll see a qualify RFA and it'll show you the dollars. So that means you're offering him that amount of money for 1 year. But that also means that if he says no and he goes to sign, Bowen Byram says no and goes to sign with the Detroit Red Wings because he wants to, you are entitled to compensation. That's the whole point of restricted free agents, is you don't lose these guys for free. That can be found over here, offer sheet compensation. So if you see a guy in free agency and he's already got a team's logo next to him, that means he's a restricted free agent. Based on the amount of money that you give him, you'll see the compensation here. So for example, if I give a guy a 5-year, $5 million contract, I need to give up this year's 1st and 3rd round picks. That guy better be damn worth a 1st and a 3rd. That's why you don't see it happen very often. But let's go back to the contracts and negotiate with Bowen Byram. I've already mentioned the ranges for forwards. Bowen Byram, 5 years, $6 million. Absolutely. I'm just kind of shocked that he would take this and love it. okay. You can see that his number doesn't get much higher the longer he goes on, so he's probably not going to grow much, but he could. It's not a guarantee, but it's usually a little tip-off that he's not going to grow too much. But at an 87, $6 million defenseman, that is an absolute highway robbery steal. So give me that for 8 years. Well, he's not a fan of that. Honestly, I will give him exactly what he wants, 6.75. I think a top-line defenseman is going to cost you over $7 million, which is why I'm so floored that Bowen Byram wants 8 years at sub 7. Like, I'll just give him 8 years at 7, and then boom, you can see the contract goes up a little bit. If we go down just a little bit, it'll obviously drop. I don't think it actually moves too much. It's not enough to move the needle for him, I guess. Okay, well, that's what the enter negotiation is for anyway. Just make sure you know what you're doing in there. You're offering the player more money. But now that I see he's worth 5 years at 6 point something, I think it was 6 million flat out, I would love to give him 8 years at 7 million. I think a top-line defenseman, 7+ million. A middle pairing defenseman, you're talking about less than 7, more than 4. And then the bottom pairing defenseman, you can probably get away with 2 or less. That's usually how I like to look at that. But let's go ahead and negotiate with Bowen Byram. I want to make sure that he's going to accept the contract entirely. Take a look at the persuasion success too, because if you try and charm him and boost his opinion on the organization, it's not worth it here. That's what the charm feature does. You just go with neutral because he already loves the organization. I would like to talk about his contract. I think I would like him more than 5 years. I think he'll be 30 at the end of this deal. If I give him a 7-year deal, because he's currently, 23. He appreciates the willingness. Okay, so he is willing to talk about a 7-year deal, and he's revising his salary expectations to only ask for 6.425. Now, I'm willing to give him a little bit more to immediately accept the offer. So I can go ahead and go increase salary. And I think, you know what? I think I could give him 6.7. This would be 6.8. Let's do 6. Actually, you know what? Let's just do 6.7 right now. 6.775. Just quickly do the math. 250,000 plus 425. Yeah, I think it's 6.675. So we'll do that. And you can see it's not quite what he's looking for, including a clause would help. Okay, I believe we could add a clause. Sure. Let's go with a modified no trade clause. Would that float your boat? What is the structure of the clause? I think a full will cover the entire contract. Or we could have it reduced, which is only in the future season. We'll just do full because I like Bowen Byram. And you can see that I can see how many teams I'll offer him. And I'll say you can say no to 12 out of the 32 teams, which means I could still trade him to 20 teams over the last 4 years of the deal. And he's okay with that. And he's fine with that. It didn't really move the needle too much on the contract. But there you go. We negotiated with them. Sometimes it's easier in here, but you get to see his thoughts and his feelings. And then, here it is. Here's how it looks. I don't love it. You can push Y or triangle, or I love it. Push the start button. He's not going to rush into his decision, so it'll take a few days to properly give it some thought. Sometimes guys will just slam the table and be like, that was an amazing offer. You do that sometimes when their contract bar is full. But that's how you would negotiate. And that's how we would look at these players. Taking a look at goalies, Luukkonen doesn't need to be re-signed, but Devin Levi does. Now, Luukkonen making sub $5 million as a starter goaltender, that's probably about right. Let's take a look at what Devin Levi would like. He would like $4 million because you can see here's our first example of a guy exponentially increasing his ask. From 2 years at 3.9, to 8 years, he wants an additional $3 million. That is a lot of the cap. You can see the salary cap percentage over there on the right. It's 4.4%. If you really want to dive into the numbers and you love that, I love the fact that they added it, so I'm going to be using that. But you can see that like 10 million is 11% of the cap, right? And you still have to fill out the rest of your entire roster, but you can negotiate there. This is an interesting one because do you think Levi is going to develop amazingly? You can give him the money now, so it looks like a bit of an overpay now, but by the time he's 27 and in his prime, it might look like an underpay. He doesn't love the organization either, probably because Luukkonen's here and signed long-term, so we'll see how that goes. But that would be the case for overpaying a guy now. Adding more years, if you think that he could potentially develop and think about our ranges, right? Do you think that he's going to be better than an 85 or an 86 in 2 years? I think he might be. He'll at least be there. So you might be able to save yourself some money. He might not ask for a 3-year deal in 2 years. He may ask for a 6-year deal in 2 years at a lot more. So it's this kind of risk reward game that you could play by offering $5.5 million now over 5 years. I can get him to come back and he'll be my number 2 goaltender for a year. And then next year, he'll be my number 1. I can ship off Luukkonen. And I'm paying my number 1 goaltender, who's an 84, 85 overall, $5.5 million, which we said was a good price to pay. And you can see that once you get above 6 million, 7 million, that's when you're talking elite goaltender status. 8 million, 9 million, you start to climb and you get better and better and better. But the thing is, 5 years from now, he'll be 27. You may be able to find another goaltender to replace Devin Levi in 5 years, or maybe you'll win the cup and just stop playing the franchise mode. But these are all things to consider when it comes to handing out contracts. And we're going to tie it all up with a bow where we started here on the proposed trade screen. When do we decide when a guy is ready? Jiri Kulich at 2078. He's not ready yet, right? He doesn't meet the criteria for a 4th liner, and I'd like to see him be closer to that 3rd line overall before I'm willing to add him to the NHL roster. So I'm going to let him develop in the minor leagues. You'll just go to the roster moves button and just make sure that he is getting sent down to the minors. Jiri Kulich at 78 at 20 still has plenty of time to grow. And if you're somebody that likes to do a slower, realistic rebuild, you can go ahead and let these guys simmer a bit longer. Sometimes you'll be able to tell in game when a player is, let me see if I can find him, Kisakov here, right? Kisakov, maybe medium top 6, but at 69 at 21, for him to be an actual 2nd liner or 3rd liner, he's going to have to get to an 82 overall, 83 overall, right? Somewhere in that range. That would be 14 overall points in just 5 years of growth. Normally, players grow maybe 3 overall points in that range. So you're hoping that everything develops perfectly for Kisakov. It's probably not going to happen. And if there is a trade to be made, you can go ahead, throw him there, and you're like, you know what? I don't want Kisakov, but I would love to have a guy like Olin Zellweger, right? Olin Zellweger, they have very similar trade value. It's not perfect, but it's close. And Olin Zellweger, he is a medium top 4, 81, so he's going to play on my 3rd pairing, and he's only 20 as an offensive defenseman. We need some more spark on the blue line. So let me throw in Kisakov and then give a pick where I'm not going to find too many good players, right? You want to keep your 1st for sure. Your 2nd is still pretty valuable. Your 3rd, I'm okay with parting with. 4th round picks, you maybe, if you did your scouting very, very well, find a player or 2 every couple years that are going to make an impact. 5, 6, 7, those picks are very much worthless and are perfect in a trade like this. I don't think Kisakov at 21, 4, 5 years left of development, is going to be able to hit an 82 and make the NHL. I'm okay giving him in a 5th for a guy that's going to absolutely help the roster right away at an 81, and he's 20, and he's got 2 years left on his ELC, which is sub 1. So there you go. Propose that trade. This screen pops up because they're telling me that I have to move Gilbert down. Gilbert is currently scratched, so I am okay with doing that. So we will hit okay, and that's how you kind of decide when a player is probably not going to make it. We'll just assistant GM best roster so I can stay here now. But looking at a guy like, we'll just go to the rookie skaters because this is a good way to just find all these types of guys. Like Jiri Kulich, even Noah Ostlund. Noah Ostlund could be a 3rd line center for us. In the next 6 years, he just has to get 7 overall points. And they don't always grow tremendously every offseason. So sometimes you'll have a good one, sometimes you won't. I think he can at least get to an 81, maybe an 82. By the time he's 24, 23, right, I think he can absolutely help us. Consta Hellenius here, 18 years old, 73, has got 2 extra years of development on Ostlund and would only have to get 2 points better. You can see where the trade value, it's similar, but that's how I would personally look at these players. You've got X amount of years to develop. They cap out when they turn 26, 27, but really 26, they don't grow much in that year. So look, 25, 26, that birthday is when they really stop. So Ostlund's got 5 to 6 years left of development. I think you can get at least 1 point, maybe 2 in every one of those years. That's a realistic setting for some of these players. especially as a medium top 6. Medium top 9, you can expect slower growth. And as you go up, right, franchise grow quicker, 3, maybe 4, 5, right? Elites can go 2, 3, 4. Franchise can go 4, 5, 6 in just one season until they hit their peak, which is that 91 or the 85 or something like that, right? So that's kind of how you decide on how to develop a player, when to move on from a player, and what players are just kind of fodder that can help you get a great player, or potentially can help you get a pick and rebuild, right? Maybe I'm just trying to rebuild the Sabres, and you know what? I don't think Victor Neuchev at 20 and 72, he's too far away. Komarov, right? Maybe I can get Komarov, and instead I will just go get my 5th round pick back because I just kind of want a little value because he's never going to be anything, but a 5th round pick could be, if your scouting works out, a low elite player. So throw that in there, trade accepted. Boom, done, right? So we got a 5th round pick. So we just basically just kind of flip-flop some prospects for some picks, and yeah, just kind of that gives you your assessment here of how to value picks, how to value prospects, and moving on from players that are older. The Sabres don't necessarily have a ton of older players, but a guy like Jason Zucker, not going to be here long term, only here for 1 year, and if you really wanted to tear it down because you're not going anywhere, offer him out. He's highlighted in green because those teams are interested in him. They fit a need. So Jason Zucker to the San Jose Sharks. You can see their salary cap bar is white, not red, so they can fit his salary is $5 million. And I could throw Zucker in there, and they are willing to give me back. Well, they don't really want to give much, but that doesn't necessarily mean too much. I'm okay with a third, and they would have to give me a player back because they have too many players in the organization. So one of the easy ways to do this is just come here, go to your trade value, sort it again, so the worst player, least valuable player is on there. And then Carlson. Tell me that's Leo Carlson. Lucas Carlson. I was going to say that'd be hilarious. But no, there you go. So a third and Lucas Carlson for Jason Zucker because I just don't think Zucker is helping us out this year. We're looking from the outside in on making the playoffs. It's January. We're at the bottom of the NHL. Goodbye, Zucker. Give me the third. And, there you go. Done. And Peyton Krebs would have to be called up, which is totally fine because I think Peyton Krebs is fine for his role. But there you go. So that's kind of how you would assess Zucker out. And maybe, just maybe, you could find a young prospect-y type player. If we take a look at rookie skaters, this is the perfect way to do it. You'll sort here, and then, you know what? I'm okay with taking a shot on this 22-year-old who's, 77 overall, right? 22, 77's got a few years left of growth. Could be a guy that plays on my as my 5th or 6th defenseman on that 3rd pairing. And all I have to do is give up a Zucker in the 5th I just acquired. And you can see how this kind of becomes natural once you do it a few more times. And I think it's the safest way to do it is just don't expect your first franchise to go perfectly. Don't expect to win the cup in the first few years, even if you pick a really, really good team. And sometimes you may win the cup in the first year, but sometimes, well, you just get lucky. And that's just how it goes. Don't fret if your team is really good, too. If you've got a great roster and you don't win the cup, that kind of stuff happens, too. I've had frustrating saves in series where my team is stacked from top to bottom, and I just can't seem to get over the hump in the playoffs. Then sometimes you reassess. You go through a quick rebuild because you've got a lot of talent. You've got a lot of value, and you can go ahead and quickly acquire quality assets, as we've talked about, and then you're right back with a new go at it. So that's one way that you could approach that. Ultimately, guys, it does take patience. A rebuild is not quick. It is going to be a few hours of gameplay, right? Even if you're just going to simulate before your team really becomes a superstar. And it's okay. But you want to remember those ranges that I mentioned. Your first line, 89 and higher is great. 88 and 87 are passable. Your second line, 87 is high quality. 84 to 87 probably is your range. Your third line, you're looking at 82, 83s. And then on your bottom line, 81s or lower is fine. Your top pairing defenseman, 91 or higher elite defenseman. Then you've got the 87s and up, are high quality first pairing defenseman. 84 to 86 in that middle pairing, that is really the sweet spot. And then on your bottom pairing, I feel like 82s and 81s are easy to come by. Goaltenders, 85 and up is great. Higher is awesome, especially if you can get them for cheap. Your backup should be around an 82. That should be plenty fine. And remember, guys, contracts, you're taking risk on now so you could be rewarded later. So you'll pay maybe a bit of a premium early, but teams that are rebuilding have the option to do that. And when a player maybe isn't as good as you thought they were, that's when keeping the cap manageable is important, because a player who's an 83 and you're paying him $8 million, that's a really tough time. That is a hard contract to get rid of. So like a JJ Peterka, if he's not as good as I thought he was and he stays at an 84 and he's $5.5 million, am I going to get the best value back for him? No, but it's certainly a movable contract. Pay your guys when you know they're going to be stars. The medium elites that have shown signs of producing or shown signs of growth, or franchise guys, pay those guys. Pay them early so you don't have to pay them $17 million in year number 5 of your save. Give them the 8-year deal, stick them around, build the team around them. Guys, if there's any questions I didn't answer, please feel free to ask me in the comment section. I will be active, and hopefully the community that we've built here on this channel, you guys are awesome, super supportive of each other. A lot of you have asked me for this, and hopefully this covers all your questions. But you guys are just so good down there in the comment section that you guys will help each other out a ton. I really, really appreciate you guys sticking through this with this video. Hopefully it helps. Come back if you have any tips or tricks that you have picked up yourself as a beginner. Sometimes seeing it from the lens of a beginner is something is hard for me, because I've been doing this on YouTube for the last 7 years now. So speaking of, we have our Toledo Underdog series. If you guys want to see me go from a really, really bad team, nobody higher than 80 overall, to a champion, go ahead and check that series out. It is in a playlist here on the channel. But guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see some more, and I will see you guys in the next one.
This a free-for-all, before we fall. This a free-for-all, before we fall. Took some L's, but I guess you can't win them all. Getting busy, been so busy, but always keeping